All right, today we're going to tackle a really big question. What actually makes an ordinary person turn towards extremism? We're diving into the psychology of radicalization. This is really an introduction, where we're going to try to unpack the why behind it all. What makes someone vulnerable to begin with?
So, when you hear the word extremist, what's the first image that pops into your head? A lot of the time, the media gives us this idea of a very specific type of person, right? But here's the question we really need to get to the bottom of. Is there actually a single terrorist profile? Does that even exist? Well, the short answer, it's a big no. I mean, decades of research have shown us that there's just no single mold, no one-size-fits-all profile for an extremist. The truth is, the path to radicalization is, well, it's more like a tangled web of different factors, not some straight, easy-to-follow line. So let's start pulling on some of those threads, shall we? Okay, so if there's no single profile, then where does this whole journey even begin? It almost always starts from within, with what we call individual vulnerability. These are the internal factors. See, long before any group from the outside gets involved, there are certain psychological states that can kind of create an open door, an invitation for extremist ideas to plant themselves.
And there are a few common vulnerabilities that really act as catalysts here. It could be something like a deep personal grievance. That feeling that you've been wronged and the system is stacked against you. Or maybe it's a powerful sense of just not fitting in, of being alienated from society. And then there's this huge one, a deep, fundamental need for an identity, for a group, a tribe, to finally belong to.
And this right here, this quote, it really gets to the heart of it. For someone who feels completely alienated, an extremist group can look a lot less like some abstract ideology and a lot more like a community. The initial pull isn't always the politics or the beliefs. It's the promise of connection. It's offering a solution to being alone, basically saying, hey, we can be your family, especially to those who feel like they don't have one.
And what these groups ultimately offer is something incredibly powerful, a sense of purpose. Think about it. If you're feeling powerless, they come along and offer you a mission. They take all that anger, all those feelings of injustice, and they give you a clear, simple, and very compelling target for it all. But an individual's vulnerability, that's really only half the story. Now we've got to look at the external forces, the sheer power of the group itself, and the, let's be honest, deliberate psychological tactics they use to reel that vulnerable person in. And one of their key tools is psychological manipulation. What these extremist groups do so well is they take our messy, complicated world and they boil it down into a super simple black and white story. There are no shades of gray. There are only heroes and villains, good guys and bad guys. And that offers this really seductive sense of certainty, an easy answer when you're overwhelmed by feelings of anger or loss. This whole simplification thing, it feeds on a really powerful psychological trigger, the us versus them mentality. You've got the in-group, that's us, and everyone's bonded by this intense loyalty and a shared purpose. Then there's everybody else, the out-group or them, and they get dehumanized. They become the scapegoat, the source of every single problem, and the target for all the group's rage.
And this is the critical turning point. This is where ideology becomes truly dangerous. That intense bond inside the group, combined with making the outgroup seem less than human, it all works together to just completely erode a person's individual moral compass. This group dynamic makes violent acts, things someone would never ever consider doing on their own, suddenly seem not just possible, but completely justifiable.
So we've looked at the individual side of things and the group dynamics that really fuel this problem. But understanding all this psychology isn't just for a textbook. It's actually the key to finding a solution. So the big question is, how do we actually move from understanding to prevention?
Well, the solution has to hit the problem head on. It's a three-step approach, really. Step one, we have to address those personal grievances before they have a chance to fester. That means making sure people feel heard and that our systems feel fair. Step two, we need to offer alternative, positive stories, hopeful narratives about the world that are just way more compelling than the simple, angry fictions that extremists are selling. And finally, step three, we have to be proactive about building real, inclusive communities that give people that genuine sense of belonging they're desperately searching for.
And here's the thing, this framework isn't just about prevention. These exact same principles, addressing grievances, offering new narratives, and rebuilding a sense of community, they're also the foundation for successful de-radicalization programs. They're what we use to help guide people out of extremist groups and back into society.
If there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Radicalization isn't really a failure of logic. It's a successful and very cynical exploitation of fundamental human needs.
So, to build any kind of defense against it, we first have to understand the why, that deep psychological pull that draws people in. Honestly, that's the only way we can start building a more resilient society.
And that really leaves us with a final, very practical question to think about. If this need to belong, this need for identity and purpose, is so incredibly powerful, then how can we, in our own lives, be more intentional about building that? How can our workplaces, our colleges, our neighborhoods, how can they become the kind of strong, inclusive communities that act as the best possible defense against extremism? That's really a challenge for every single one of us to think about.